The best judge of the needs of an individual school is usually that school's teachers and community. The best place to sort out disagreements which previously have led to some kind of industrial conflict is also in the school. We've been working with the Teachers Federation on a new approach to industrial relations. The approach is essentially preventative. It's based on addressing problems early, consulting and collaborating more in the school before the issue gets out of hand. Together, we've revised the Teacher's Handbook, reviewed staff welfare procedures, developed a mechanism for preventing and resolving conflict, and designed the Industrial Relations Training course for principals and Federation representatives. This is a good start. The new procedures will enable principals, Federation representatives and teachers to manage industrial relations within the school. We all like to work in a situation where we have a say in what goes on. We all like working in an environment free from friction. These procedures will give us this environment. They will operate within a statewide framework negotiated between the Department of School Education and the New South Wales Teachers Federation. An improved industrial relations climate will benefit students, teachers, the Federation and the Department. I am committed to working with the New South Wales Teachers Federation in pursuit of this goal.
In the broadest sense, industrial relations deals with the behaviour and interaction of people at work. Over the last decade, industrial relations in Australia have changed dramatically. There's a movement away from centralised conciliation and arbitration, and a new emphasis on local decision-making, enterprise agreements, flexibility, and a greater emphasis on productivity and job satisfaction. The changes have affected every profession, including teaching. The current system should be understood in the context of the history of Australia's industrial relations. Industrial relations have always reflected the economic circumstances of the day. In the years following the heady gold rush days of the 1850s, Australia experienced a long economic boom with expanding wheat and wool industries. Australia's trade unions, modelled on the British craft unions, were also prospering. Until the late 19th century, the education system was not unionised. In 1880, the Public Instruction Act saw teachers classified as public servants. Women received lower wages than men and fewer career options. They were expected to resign when they married. The system was highly centralised. Syllabuses, administration and assessment were all based in Sydney, and teachers had little say in where or under what conditions they worked. Teachers followed strict instructions from head office. A powerful inspectorate monitored teachers' work. At the beginning of the 1890s, the boom came to an abrupt end. Economic recession, bank crashes, strikes, unemployment, and drought led to a virtual reconstruction of Australian society. As the Depression set in, employers took a much harder line with their employees. They set out to replace compulsory unionism with freedom of contract. In the great strikes which followed, which were the most bitter industrial confrontation in Australia's history, the unions were severely weakened. In response, they formed Labour parties, which soon achieved representation in Parliament. The formation of the Australian Labor Party and the legacy of the divisive strikes gave impetus to compulsory arbitration. At Federation in 1901, Section 51 of the Constitution gave the federal government power to make laws for conciliation and arbitration for the settlement of industrial disputes extending beyond the limits of any one state. The setting of industrial relations legislation within the Constitution provided a legal framework for the processes of conciliation over disputes, arbitration, federal court determination. The Commonwealth and states shared the industrial relations powers. All state governments continued to maintain industrial relations systems. The New South Wales Industrial Arbitration Act provided the New South Wales Industrial Commission with conciliation and arbitration power over disputes within New South Wales. The turmoil of the 1890s also affected teachers. In 1895, they took a large pay cut. Women and less qualified teachers were the hardest hit. In 1918, a number of teacher organisations amalgamated to form the New South Wales Teachers Federation. It was registered in 1919 as a union and became part of the arbitration system. Throughout the Depression and World War II, the federal tribunals became more dominant. Gradually, Australia evolved its unique system of centralised wage fixing and arbitration. On October 1st, 1968, the Federation, for the first time in its history, called a strike, and 80% of teachers responded. Many disputes and all awards since that time have been processed through the State Industrial Commission. The situation remained until 1986, when the Australian Teachers Union was registered as a federal union, capable of seeking an award for teachers should an interstate dispute occur. At the end of last year, the union sought portability of superannuation. During the 70s and 80s, the employing authority for teachers changed from the Public Service Board to the Education Commission in 1980 to the Ministry of Education in 1988. Today, for all practical purposes, the Director General is the employer of all government school teachers. Since the late 80s, one of the principal themes in Australian industrial relations has been the move towards decentralisation and flexibility, with a focus on individual industries and attempts to reorganise work to make it more effective. These changes have included the Prices and Income Accord, the two-tier wage system, and the structural efficiency principle. Structural efficiency was seen as a way of restructuring awards intended to create a more flexible, multi-skilled workforce. It included provisions for broadbanding of job classifications, improved career paths, and reform of training procedures leading to greater job satisfaction. The current Teachers Award is based on the structural efficiency principle. It allowed for greater flexibility for schools, provided an increase in teacher salaries, and restated the importance of teaching, learning, and the curriculum. It provided for the broadening of classifications of principals' positions and for the creation of advanced skills teachers' positions. The Scott Report 1989 and the New South Wales Industrial Relations Act 1991 have also had an impact on education in New South Wales. They have continued the trends of devolution, decentralisation, and enterprise bargaining. While the Federation and Department of School Education may not agree on some aspects of these changes, both recognise the need to equip staff with the skills to meet the changed roles and responsibilities. In 1992, Mr. Ted Hegney reviewed industrial relations in schools. He recommended an approach based more on consultation, negotiation, collaboration, and conflict prevention. The review recognised the excellent services of the union and departmental officers and the common ground that already exists in preventative industrial relations strategies. The review also recognised the important role of the Federation representatives and principals in establishing better relationships in the workplace. Mr. Hegney recommended an emphasis on consultation, negotiation and collaboration, an environment based on conflict prevention.
It's a process which emphasises collaboration and cooperation. It emphasises the prevention of conflict, and it gives us clear guidelines on the resolution of conflict if that's needed at the school level.
Collaboration in decision making is not a new process in quite a number of schools in New South Wales. Principals and staffs have been using it in schools across the state, and I think if you have a look at those and see what has been happening there, you'll generally find that they're happier places, there's far less conflict, and you have staffs and principals who believe that all have some sort of ownership of decisions that are being made there.
Mr. Hegney recommended a set of agreed grievance procedures, a more structured system of industrial relations at all levels.
The outcome of Hegney is a more formalised and documented approach, but it still, by and large, reflects all the good practices that have been making good schools effective learning institutions for a number of years.
The main benefit is that schools will be able to manage a lot more of their industrial relations themselves, and I think with this program and the initiatives that are being taken jointly by the department and the Teachers Federation, that we will have happier schools and very productive schools for young people.
He also recommended improved welfare services, clear working conditions and entitlements, and joint training programs.
It's essential that the principal and the Federation representative in each school are seen to be a team working together. And they need to be, in fact, a model for the rest of the staff about how we work together and how we consult. But I believe it should go a lot further than that. It's not two people that are running industrial relations in the school, it's the whole staff.
I think that the thing that people need to understand is that this is probably the first time that there has been a concerted effort by the department and the Teachers Federation to work together to improve the situation. This isn't the be-all and end-all. The union still has a role, and the union still has a role in many of the areas that it's always had a role. But we're trying to say, well, there are some places where we can organise things better at a school level, and when the union is required, the union will still be used. And there will be areas of conflict that are statewide, and there will be areas of conflict that end up in the industrial courts, and that's as it should be.
In line with the Hegney recommendations, both the Teachers Federation and the Department of School Education are working cooperatively to create an improved industrial environment. They have jointly designed an industrial relations system to pinpoint the causes of the dispute and provide the mechanics to resolve it, whilst protecting and recognising the interests of all parties.
In any working environment, there will always be different opinions and interpretations at all levels on what is best for all concerned in the workplace. The importance of dealing with these differences is to be able to recognise and respect them. Both the Teachers Federation and the department have substantial responsibilities to the students and teachers of New South Wales. Both organisations are legitimate parties committed to improving teaching and learning, and both support the better management of schools. In line with the Hegney recommendations, the Teachers Federation and the department are working more cooperatively to create a more positive and productive industrial relations environment. The Federation fully supports the concepts of consultation, negotiation and collaboration as outlined in the Hegney Review. It acknowledges the professionalism of teachers and supports their participation in decision-making processes which affect the nature and quality of their work. In practical terms, many aspects of industrial relations will now be dealt with at the school level and be a natural part of good school management. Progress towards a more productive industrial relations environment will require training for all concerned. I commend to you this joint initiative for principals and Federation representatives. I ask you to approach industrial relations in your school in a positive and cooperative way.
Remember, if you want to talk,